March 27, 1929. Manhattan. The steel beam rises 860 feet above the street, where construction crews prepare to defy what European engineers called the iron law of skyscraper building. One worker dies for every floor above 15. The Chrysler building would reach 77 floors. By European calculations, 62 men should die. Through the grinding of rivets and hiss of steam, 3,000 American workers began what experts declared impossible: high-speed construction without the body count. European-trained engineers watched from below, certain that Walter Chrysler's automotive assembly line methods would collapse under the weight of gravity and human limits. The Brooklyn Bridge had claimed 27 lives. Even the safer Empire State Project would kill 5 workers among 3,400. Construction foremen across the city routinely budgeted for coffins alongside steel beams. But 800 feet above Manhattan, American innovation was about to shatter the death equation that had governed construction for decades. The question wasn't whether Chrysler's workers would survive. The question was, how many wouldn't? The morning of March 27, 1929, brought Walter Chrysler to the construction site at Lexington Avenue and 42nd Street, where his 77-story gamble would either vindicate American industrial methods or prove European engineers right about the deadly arithmetic of high-rise construction. The Detroit auto magnate stood among the assembled crowd of reporters, city officials, and skeptical construction veterans, watching as the first massive steel beam swung into position above what would become the foundation of his architectural monument. Chrysler had already committed $20 million of his personal fortune to this project, bypassing Wall Street financing entirely while his competitors scrambled for investment capital. His decision to self-finance stemmed from more than just financial prudence. It represented his absolute confidence in American manufacturing principles applied to construction. Where European methods demanded deliberate, cautious progress measured in months per floor, Chrysler envisioned steel rising at 4 floors per week, completed in 19 months total. The established wisdom governing skyscraper construction had emerged from decades of grim experience. The Brooklyn Bridge, completed in 1883, had claimed 27 lives during its 14-year construction. The Woolworth Building, finished in 1913, had killed multiple workers despite relatively conservative construction timelines. Even recent projects built with improved safety measures continued the deadly pattern. The Empire State Building, begun just months earlier, would ultimately sacrifice 5 workers among its 3,400 crew members. European-trained engineers had codified these casualties into mathematical certainty. Buildings exceeding 15 floors entered what they termed the death zone, where gravity, wind, and human error combined into lethal equations. The accepted formula was brutal in its simplicity. Expect 1 worker death for every floor above the 15th level. At 77 floors, the Chrysler Building should kill 62 men. H. Craig Severance, Van Allen's former business partner, represented this conventional wisdom. His 40-story building at 40 Wall Street was proceeding according to established protocols, careful planning, proven techniques, and realistic expectations about human cost. Severance commanded respect throughout the East Coast architectural establishment precisely because he followed time-tested methods that balanced ambition with practical limitations. But Chrysler's approach challenged every assumption underlying traditional construction. His automotive background had taught him that systematic organization and worker protection actually increased productivity rather than limiting it. In Detroit, his assembly lines moved faster and safer than competitors precisely because he invested in worker training, safety equipment, and systematic procedures. The same principles, he believed, could transform construction. William Van Allen, the Brooklyn-born architect who had trained at Paris's École des Beaux-Arts, served as Chrysler's creative partner in this industrial experiment. Van Allen's European education had shown him classical construction methods, but his American ambition drove him toward radical innovations. His design for the Chrysler Building incorporated advanced steel frame techniques with decorative elements that had never been attempted at such heights. The project's secrecy added another layer of complexity to the construction challenge. Van Allen and Chrysler worked in absolute confidence to hide their plans from competitors, particularly Severance's team at 40 Wall Street. The two projects had escalated into what newspapers called the race into the sky, with each building's true height remaining classified information. This secrecy meant that even the 2,400 workers couldn't know their building's final specifications. Fred Tillet's construction company would coordinate the massive undertaking, managing relationships between Carnegie Steel Company for raw materials, American Bridge Company for steel fabrication, and the enormous workforce required for daily operations. Lay had built his reputation on delivering complex projects ahead of schedule, but the Chrysler building demanded unprecedented precision and speed. The construction timeline defied every established practice in the industry. European methods typically required 3 to 4 years for buildings of comparable size, with most of that time dedicated to careful masonry work and deliberate structural assembly. Chrysler's 19-month deadline meant that traditional approaches were impossible. His team would need to develop entirely new methods for materials handling, workforce coordination, and safety management. By June 1929, 3 months after groundbreaking, the steel structure had reached only a few floors above street level. Critics whispered that Chrysler's gamble was already failing, that his automotive assembly line thinking couldn't translate to the vertical challenges of skyscraper construction. Construction foremen throughout Manhattan watched the project with professional skepticism, certain that speed and safety remained mutually exclusive at such heights. European observers expressed particular doubt about American steel frame techniques. Continental construction relied heavily on masonry and stone, materials that required careful, deliberate installation but provided proven stability. The American approach of hanging everything on a steel skeleton struck European engineers as fundamentally unstable, especially when attempted at unprecedented speeds. The project's financial pressure intensified these technical challenges. Chrysler's personal financing meant that delays directly impacted his automotive business, while the competitive race with Severance's building demanded constant progress updates. Every day of construction delay represented thousands of dollars in additional costs and lost competitive advantage. Yet Chrysler remained confident in his mysterious precautions for worker safety. When pressed by reporters and city officials, he refused to detail his methods, telling skeptics that if they knew the protective measures he had implemented, they might change their minds about the project's feasibility. His automotive experience had taught him that worker protection and operational efficiency were complementary rather than competing priorities. The question facing Manhattan that summer was whether American industrial innovation could overcome the deadly arithmetic that had governed construction for decades. 62 workers' lives hung in the balance of an untested theory about systematic safety and precision manufacturing applied to unprecedented heights. By July 1929, the mysterious precautions Walter Chrysler had promised began revealing themselves through systematic innovations that transformed every aspect of construction operations. His automotive assembly line experience had taught him that worker safety and production speed were not opposing forces, but complementary elements of efficient manufacturing. The same principles that had revolutionized automobile production in Detroit were now being applied 800 feet above Manhattan streets. Chrysler's first innovation involved completely reimagining materials, handling, and worker movement throughout the construction site. Traditional skyscraper projects relied on primitive hoisting systems that required workers to manually guide steel beams and building materials to their destinations, creating constant opportunities for crushing injuries and falls. Chrysler implemented a coordinated system of multiple hoists operating on precise schedules, with designated landing areas on each floor and trained crews responsible for specific materials handling tasks. The coordination extended to every supplier relationship in ways that European construction had never attempted. Carnegie Steel Company delivered materials according to exact specifications and delivery schedules that matched construction progress floor by floor. American Bridge Company fabricated steel components with automotive-level precision, ensuring that pieces arrived on site ready for immediate installation without the field modifications that typically cause delays and safety hazards. This supply chain integration eliminated the chaotic materials storage and worker improvisation that characterized traditional construction sites. Fred Tillet's construction teams operated under safety protocols that borrowed directly from automotive manufacturing procedures. Every worker received specific training for his assigned tasks, rather than the traditional system where experienced workers taught newcomers through informal apprenticeships. Chrysler insisted on standardized safety equipment for every crew member, including safety belts, hard hats, and protective clothing that had never been systematically used in construction before. The pace of construction accelerated dramatically as these systems proved their effectiveness. Steel installation proceeded at rates that astounded industry observers, 4 floors per week compared to the traditional timeline of 1 floor every 2 weeks. The building's steel frame began rising with mechanical precision that reminded witnesses more of automobile assembly than traditional construction. By August, the structure had reached 35 floors without a single serious injury among the 3,000 workers. William Van Allen's architectural innovations complemented Chrysler's operational methods through design elements that prioritized both worker safety and construction efficiency. His steel frame techniques eliminated much of the dangerous masonry work that traditionally claimed workers' lives on high-rise projects. The building's exterior would feature decorative elements made from Nerosta stainless steel, an 18% chromium, 8% nickel alloy that represented the first American use of this German-developed material. These prefabricated decorative components could be installed with precision and safety that stone carving could never match. The Nerosta steel represented more than just aesthetic innovation, it embodied Chrysler's commitment to superior American materials and manufacturing methods. European construction relied heavily on stone and traditional masonry that required skilled craftsmen working in dangerous conditions hundreds of feet above street level. Chrysler's approach used precision-manufactured components that could be installed by trained workers using systematic procedures rather than individual craftsmanship. Worker productivity increased as crews developed confidence in Chrysler's safety systems. The traditional construction culture of accepting casualties as inevitable began giving way to expectations that every worker would complete his shift and return home safely. This psychological transformation proved as important as the mechanical innovations. Workers operating with confidence in their safety equipment and procedures could focus entirely on precision and speed rather than constant survival calculations. The project's secrecy added operational complexity, but also demonstrated the effectiveness of Chrysler's systematic approach. Even though workers couldn't know the building's final height, they could execute their assigned tasks with complete confidence because every procedure had been planned and tested in advance. This systematic approach contrasted sharply with traditional construction, where workers constantly adapted to changing conditions and improvised solutions to unexpected problems. European observers visiting the construction site struggled to understand what they were witnessing. The speed of construction defied their experience with stone and masonry techniques that dominated continental building methods. More significantly, the absence of casualties challenged their fundamental assumptions about the relationship between construction speed and worker safety. European construction wisdom held that faster building necessarily meant more dangerous conditions, but Chrysler's project was proving that systematic safety actually enabled greater speed. The financial pressure from the competitive race with Chrysler, Craig Severance's 40 Wall Street project intensified the importance of every operational innovation. Severance's building was proceeding according to conventional methods and timelines, making steady progress through proven techniques. The contrast between the two projects represented more than architectural competition. It embodied the fundamental difference between European-influenced traditional methods and American industrial innovation. By September 1929, the Chrysler Building's steel construction neared completion after just 6 months of structural work. The achievement defied every expert prediction about construction timelines and safety records. 391,881 rivets had been installed with precision that matched automotive manufacturing standards. 3,826,000 bricks were being laid manually by crews who had never worked safer or faster. The installation of each steel beam followed procedures that Chrysler had adapted from automotive assembly techniques. Workers operated in coordinated teams with specific responsibilities, using standardized tools and following systematic protocols that eliminated the improvisation and individual heroics that traditionally characterized dangerous construction work. Safety became a matter of following proven procedures, rather than relying on individual skill and luck. The building's progress represented vindication of American industrial methods applied to construction challenges. Chrysler had proven that systematic organization, worker protection, and precision manufacturing could achieve what European tradition considered impossible: unprecedented construction speed with zero worker fatalities. The question remaining was whether these innovations could survive the ultimate test of completing the world's tallest building while maintaining the perfect safety record that had confounded every expert prediction. The completion of the steel structure in September 1929 marked only the beginning of William Van Allen's most audacious gamble. Deep within the building's upper floors, hidden from competing architects and curious observers, construction crews were secretly assembling what would become the Chrysler Building's ultimate triumph, a 125-foot steel spire that would crown the structure and claim the title of world's tallest building. Van Allen had designed the spire in 4 separate sections, each weighing thousands of pounds and requiring precision engineering that pushed American steel fabrication to its absolute limits. The secrecy surrounding this element was complete. Even most of the workers constructing the building remained unaware of the spire's existence. Only a select team of steelworkers and engineers knew that the building's true height would far exceed the 77 floors visible from street level. The competition with H. Craig Severance's building at 40 Wall Street had intensified throughout the summer, with both projects racing toward completion and the coveted height record. Severance's conventional approach was producing steady progress, and his building appeared likely to claim the tallest structure title through proven methods and realistic timelines. Van Allen's secret weapon would need flawless execution to succeed. The spire's construction required innovations in both engineering and worker safety that had never been attempted at such heights. Each section had to be assembled inside the building, then raised through carefully planned openings in the structure's crown. The precision required for this operation demanded that Chrysler's systematic safety methods prove themselves under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Frank Butkus, a 37-year-old steelworker from Pennsylvania, represented the skilled immigrant labor that formed the backbone of American construction. His crew specialized in high-altitude steel installation, working with riveting equipment and structural connections 800 feet above Manhattan. Butkus had learned to trust Chrysler's safety innovations through months of accident-free construction, but the spire installation would test that confidence beyond any previous experience. The psychological pressure on workers intensified as the building's height increased. Traditional construction wisdom held that accidents became increasingly likely as structures rose above 50 floors, where wind conditions and human fatigue combined with mechanical stress to create deadly situations. Yet the Chrysler Building's crews continued working without serious injuries, defying statistical expectations that had governed construction planning for decades. Van Allen's architectural vision required workers to perform tasks that European trained engineers considered impossible. The building's Art Deco ornamentation included decorative elements that needed installation at extreme heights using techniques that had never been tested on such a scale. The Neurosta stainless steel components demanded precision placement that left no margin for the improvisation typically required in high-altitude construction work. The spire's weight distribution presented engineering challenges that pushed American steel frame construction into uncharted territory. Each section needed to be perfectly balanced and secured before the next component could be added, requiring mathematical precision in structural calculations and absolutely flawless execution by construction crews. A single miscalculation or installation error could result in catastrophic failure that would destroy the entire project and kill dozens of workers. By October, the Chrysler Building had reached its planned 77 floors, matching the height that competitors expected would represent its completion. Van Allen watched from street level as the secret spire sections were maneuvered into position for the final assembly sequence. The architectural triumph he had envisioned for months now depended entirely on the skill and courage of American workers operating at heights where no human beings had ever worked before. The installation process required unprecedented coordination between multiple crane operators, steel crews, and engineering supervisors. Each movement of the massive spire sections had to be calculated and executed with automotive-level precision, leaving no room for the trial-and-error approach that characterized traditional construction methods. Chrysler's systematic safety protocols were being tested under conditions that would determine whether American industrial innovation could truly surpass European construction limitations. Weather conditions added another layer of complexity to the spire installation. October winds at 860 feet above Manhattan created forces that could turn precision engineering into deadly chaos within minutes. Van Allen's crew needed perfect conditions and flawless execution to complete the installation safely, with no opportunity for delays or second attempts. The workers selected for the spire installation represented the elite of American construction labor. These men had proven themselves through months of accident-free work under Chrysler's safety systems, developing skills and confidence that enabled them to perform tasks European workers would consider suicidal. Their trust in American innovation and systematic safety procedures would determine whether Van Allen's architectural vision could become reality. Giuseppe Romano, a 28-year-old riveter from Brooklyn, had worked on the building since construction began. His specialty was structural connections that required absolute precision under extreme conditions. Romano's Italian immigrant background represented the diverse workforce that was building America's monuments through skill, courage, and faith in American opportunity. The spire installation would test every lesson he had learned about American construction methods. The secrecy surrounding the spire meant that even the workers installing it couldn't fully understand the historical significance of their task. They knew they were attempting something unprecedented, but the full implications of their work, claiming the world's tallest building record through American innovation, remained hidden until the installation's completion. Van Allen's design incorporated safety features that had never been tested at such heights. Emergency protocols, backup systems, and redundant safety measures were built into every aspect of the spire installation, reflecting Chrysler's commitment to protecting workers even while attempting the impossible. The question was whether systematic American safety methods could function effectively under conditions that pushed human endurance and engineering precision beyond all previous limits. The spire installation would occur over several days in October, with each phase requiring perfect weather conditions and flawless execution by crews working at heights where atmospheric pressure and wind conditions created physical challenges no construction workers had ever faced before. October 23, 1929, dawned clear and windless over Manhattan, providing William Van Allen with the perfect conditions he had waited months to achieve. From wooden platforms, 860 feet above the street, Giuseppe Romano and his elite crew of 12 steelworkers prepared to install the 54,000-pound steel needle that would crown the Chrysler Building and claim the world's tallest structure record. Van Allen stood on Lexington Avenue, craning his neck upward, nauseated by the risk he was asking these men to assume. The spire installation required coordination between 4 separate crane operators, each controlling equipment that had never been tested at such extreme heights. The primary crane, positioned on the building's 75th floor, would lift the final spire section through a carefully engineered opening in the structure's crown. Secondary cranes would guide the massive steel component into precise alignment, while workers secured it with rivets and structural connections that demanded absolute accuracy. Romano checked his safety equipment one final time before beginning the installation sequence. His safety belt, manufactured according to Chrysler's specifications, represented innovations in worker protection that had emerged from automotive manufacturing principles. The belt's design incorporated redundant security systems and high-strength materials that had been tested under conditions simulating the extreme forces workers would experience during high-altitude steel installation. The spire itself represented a masterpiece of American steel fabrication and engineering precision. Each section had been manufactured to tolerances measured in fractions of inches, ensuring that the components would align perfectly despite the structural stresses and wind forces acting on the building at such heights. The steel's composition included chromium and nickel alloys that provided strength-to-weight ratios, superior to any materials used in European construction. Frank Butkus operated the primary crane with mechanical precision learned through months of experience with Chrysler's systematic safety procedures. His movements followed predetermined sequences that eliminated improvisation and reduced the margin for error to absolute minimum levels. Every crane operation had been planned, practiced, and coordinated with the installation crew to ensure that mechanical and human elements functioned as an integrated system. The installation process began at dawn, with the first spire section rising slowly through the building's crown opening. The component's weight created stresses on the crane equipment that pushed American mechanical engineering to its operational limits. Van Allen watched the massive steel section swing gently in the morning breeze, calculating wind forces and structural loads with the precision that had made his architectural vision possible. Weather conditions remained stable through the morning hours, providing the installation crew with the consistent atmospheric conditions necessary for safe completion of their task. Wind speeds remained below 10 miles per hour, well within the safety parameters that Van Allen and Chrysler had established for high-altitude construction work. Temperature and humidity levels created optimal conditions for steel expansion and contraction calculations. The crew's coordination reflected months of training under Chrysler's systematic safety protocols. Each worker knew his specific responsibilities and timing requirements, eliminating the confusion and communication problems that traditionally plagued high-risk construction operations. Hand signals, safety procedures, and emergency protocols had been practiced until they became automatic responses that functioned effectively even under extreme stress conditions. Romano guided the spire section into its mounting brackets with movements that demonstrated the precision training that separated Chrysler's workers from traditional construction crews. His understanding of steel properties, structural engineering, and safety procedures enabled him to perform tasks that European workers would consider impossible. The installation proceeded according to predetermined timelines that reflected Van Allen's confidence in American industrial methods. By midday, the spire installation had reached its most critical phase. The final section, weighing 27,000 pounds, needed to be positioned and secured while crews worked on platforms that swayed gently in wind currents 860 feet above Manhattan streets. The psychological pressure on workers intensified as they performed tasks that had never been attempted at such heights, relying entirely on systematic safety procedures and American engineering innovation. The precision required for final alignment pushed both human skill and mechanical equipment to their absolute performance limits. Tolerances measured in quarter-inch increments became critical factors in structural stability and worker safety. Van Allen's architectural calculations had to prove themselves under conditions where theoretical engineering met practical construction reality at unprecedented heights. The installation's success demonstrated the effectiveness of Chrysler's systematic approach to worker protection and operational efficiency. Each safety procedure, training protocol, and equipment specification had been developed through careful analysis of automotive manufacturing principles applied to construction challenges. The spire installation represented the ultimate test of whether these innovations could function under the most extreme conditions imaginable. News reporters gathered on surrounding buildings and streets, documenting what appeared to be the completion of an impossible engineering feat. The Chrysler building's height record seemed assured, but the installation's success depended on the final hours of construction work that would secure the spire permanently to the building's structure. Van Allen's nausea increased as afternoon shadows lengthened and installation work continued at heights where human error could result in catastrophic failure. His architectural vision required absolute trust in American workers and innovative safety systems that had never been tested under such extreme conditions. The spire's completion would vindicate his faith in systematic innovation over traditional construction methods. By late afternoon, October 23rd, the installation neared completion. Romano and his crew had worked for nearly 12 hours at heights, where atmospheric conditions and physical stress created challenges no construction workers had ever faced. Their success represented more than architectural achievement. It demonstrated that American industrial innovation and worker protection could accomplish what European tradition considered impossible. The spire installation concluded just as financial markets in Lower Manhattan began experiencing the tremors that would culminate in the following day's catastrophic crash. Van Allen's architectural triumph was completed mere hours before economic disaster would transform the context of every construction project in America. October 24th arrived with newspaper headlines celebrating the Chrysler Building's height record, unaware that within hours, the Wall Street crash would begin reshaping American economic reality and challenging every assumption about construction financing, worker employment, and architectural ambition. The Wall Street crash of October 24th, 1929, arrived like a financial earthquake that shattered construction projects throughout Manhattan, but Walter Chrysler's building stood immune to the economic devastation that destroyed his competitors' financing. His decision to fund the entire $20 million project from personal resources rather than stock market speculation meant that construction could continue even as banks failed and investment capital evaporated across the city. Ochoa, Craig Severance's building at 40 Wall Street, faced immediate financial pressure as investors withdrew funding and construction loans became impossible to secure. Projects that had seemed certain to reach completion suddenly found themselves abandoned as the economic crisis eliminated the speculative money that had fueled the building boom. Chrysler's conservative financing approach, criticized by many as unnecessarily cautious, now appeared prophetic. Throughout the winter of 1929 and 1930, Giuseppe Romano and Frank Butkus continued their work on the Chrysler Building's completion, installing the final interior systems and exterior ornamentation that would transform Van Alen's steel skeleton into a finished architectural masterpiece. The economic crisis created uncertainty about employment throughout the construction industry, but Chrysler's workers enjoyed job security that had become impossible to find elsewhere in Manhattan. The building's financing stability enabled Van Alen to complete his most ambitious architectural elements without the cost-cutting pressures that were destroying other projects. The Nyrosta stainless steel ornamentation proceeded according to original specifications, creating decorative elements that demonstrated American industrial capability even as the broader economy collapsed. Each ornamental component represented precision manufacturing that European craftsmen could not duplicate. Van Alen's design innovations proved their worth during the final construction phases. When traditional masonry and stonework would have required massive labor forces that the economic crisis had made unaffordable, the steel frame structure with prefabricated decorative elements could be completed by smaller crews working with greater efficiency, making the project economically viable even during the worst financial conditions since the Civil War. The spire installation's success in October had transformed the Chrysler Building from an ambitious construction project into a symbol of American engineering achievement. At 1,046 feet, the structure exceeded the Eiffel Tower's height and claimed the title of world's tallest building. More significantly, the installation had been completed without injuries, demonstrating that American innovation could achieve unprecedented results while protecting worker safety. European architectural observers struggled to understand how American methods had succeeded where traditional approaches would have failed. The building's rapid construction timeline, innovative safety systems, and perfect worker safety record challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between speed, safety, and structural quality in high-rise construction. The Chrysler Building represented proof that systematic industrial methods could surpass centuries of European construction tradition. Fred Tillet's coordination of materials, workers, and construction sequences had created an operational model that other contractors began studying and adapting for their own projects. The integration of Carnegie Steel, American Bridge Company, and 3,000 workers into a seamless production system demonstrated that construction could function with automotive-level precision and efficiency when properly organized. By spring 1930, the building's interior completion proceeded according to Van Alen's original timeline, despite the economic chaos surrounding the project. The Art Deco lobby, elevator systems, and mechanical infrastructure represented the finest American craftsmanship and engineering, creating spaces that rivaled European palaces while incorporating modern technologies that European buildings could not match. The zero fatality record became the project's most significant achievement, surpassing even the height record in its implications for American construction methods. 3,000 workers had completed 19 months of dangerous high-altitude construction without a single death, shattering the mathematical certainty that had governed construction planning since skyscrapers began rising above 15 floors. Walter Chrysler's vindication speech to assembled reporters and city officials on May 27, 1930, emphasized the human achievement over the architectural record. Standing in the completed lobby surrounded by the Neurosta steel and marble that represented American industrial artistry, Chrysler declared that his building had proven worker safety and construction speed were not opposing forces, but complementary elements of superior engineering. The building's opening to the public drew crowds that marveled not only at its height, but at the systematic innovations that had made its construction possible. Visitors learned that American assembly line thinking, applied to construction challenges, had created methods that protected workers while achieving unprecedented results. The zero fatality record became a point of national pride that transcended architectural achievement. Romano and Butkus, along with hundreds of their fellow workers, attended the building's dedication ceremony with pride that extended beyond personal accomplishment. They had participated in proving that American industrial methods could protect working men while achieving results that European tradition considered impossible. Their trust in Chrysler's systematic safety innovations had been vindicated through perfect execution under the most dangerous conditions imaginable. The contrast with H. Craig Severance's conventional approach became stark as economic pressures forced compromises in traditional construction projects throughout the city. Buildings that had relied on proven methods and established financing found themselves unable to adapt to changing conditions, while the Chrysler Building's innovative approaches provided flexibility that enabled successful completion despite unprecedented challenges. Van Allen's architectural vision had required absolute faith in American workers and industrial methods that had never been tested under such extreme conditions. The building's completion validated his belief that systematic innovation could surpass traditional limitations, creating structures that combined unprecedented height with perfect worker safety records. The Empire State Building, begun during the Chrysler Building's construction, would surpass its height record within 11 months, but the safety achievement would remain unique. The Empire State Project would ultimately kill 5 workers among its construction crew, maintaining the deadly arithmetic that the Chrysler Building had uniquely avoided. Chrysler's personal investment of $20 million had created more than an architectural monument. It had demonstrated that American industrial principles could transform construction from a deadly gamble into a systematic process that protected human life while achieving unprecedented results. The building stood as permanent proof that innovation and worker protection were not luxury expenses, but essential elements of superior engineering. The zero fatality record established a new standard for American construction, proving that the deadly arithmetic Europeans had accepted as inevitable could be overcome through systematic safety methods and precision organization applied to the most dangerous construction challenges imaginable.